The rain fell in a relentless downpour, soaking my tattered clothes and plastering my hair to my face. My feet, bare and bleeding, left a trail of red along the highway's cracked pavement. Each step was agony, but the fear of being caught again drove me forward. Escape had been my only thought for weeks. Now, as the Grayson mansion loomed in the distance, I wasn't sure if I was running toward salvation or more heartbreak. Memories of the past months clouded my mind, the damp, cold cell where I'd been chained like an animal, the cruel laughter of my captors, and Elias's voice on the phone. His calm, detached words still rang in my ears. Let her learn her place. I swallowed back the tears threatening to blur my vision. Weakness had no place in my heart now. Not after what I'd endured. Not after what I'd become. The Grayson mansion stood tall, its pristine white columns glistening under the rain. I hesitated at the gates, my heart pounding against my ribcage. Home. At least, it used to be. Now, it felt as foreign as the wilderness I'd escaped from. The guards stared at me, their eyes widening in disbelief. One of them stammered, "Miss Amara?" "Let me in," I croaked. My voice sounded alien to me, raw from days of silence and screaming. Inside, the grand foyer was as I remembered, opulent, imposing, and cold. My muddy footprints stood out starkly against the polished marble floor. I took a shaky breath, trying to steady myself as I heard the unmistakable voice of Elias. "Amara?" I looked up to see him at the top of the staircase, his tailored suit immaculate, his expression unreadable. For a fleeting moment, I thought I saw something like shock in his eyes. But it was quickly replaced by disdain. "What happened to you?" he asked, descending the stairs. "You happened," I said, my voice trembling with rage. "You left me to rot." Elias's mouth opened as if to respond, but the sharp click of heels on marble interrupted him. "Lila." Of course, she would appear now. "Oh dear," she said, her voice dripping with mock concern. "It's good to see you're back, Amara." I clenched my fists, willing myself not to lose control. Her smug smile only fueled my anger. Memories of the captors whispering her name flared in my mind. She'd been part of it, I was certain. "You knew," I spat, pointing a trembling finger at her. "You were part of it." Her smile faltered, but only for a second. "I have no idea what you're talking about," she said smoothly. "Enough, Amara," Elias said, his tone cold and dismissive. "You've clearly been through a lot. Let's not make baseless accusations." Baseless? My blood boiled, but I bit my tongue. No one here would believe me without proof. For now, I'd have to bide my time. I stormed out of the mansion, rain soaking me anew. My fury and humiliation burned hotter than the cold. I didn't know where I was going, but anywhere felt better than there. "Amara." The voice stopped me in my tracks. I turned to see Victor standing near the gates, his sharp eyes scanning me with concern. Elias's former bodyguard. For a moment, I felt a flicker of safety. "Let me take you somewhere safe," he said. I hesitated. Trust didn't come easily anymore, but staying wasn't an option. I nodded. Victor's apartment was small and unassuming. I sank onto his couch, clutching the tea he handed me. As the warmth seeped into my hands, I found myself spilling everything: the kidnapping, Elias's betrayal, and my suspicions about Lila. Victor listened in silence, his expression hardening with every word. When I finished, he leaned forward, his voice low but firm. "You're not alone in this, Amara. We'll figure it out together." The next morning, I woke to the sound of Victor typing. I padded into the living room, still sore but more determined than ever. "She's been transferring money to an offshore account," Victor said, pointing at his laptop screen. "It's tied to shell companies connected to your captors." My heart raced. "That's it. That's the connection." "It's a start," he said. "But we'll need more if we're going to take her down." I nodded, a spark of hope igniting within me. For the first time, I felt like we had a chance. While Victor dug deeper into Lila's activities, I sifted through the few belongings I'd salvaged. Among them was a worn envelope with my name scrawled across the front in my biological mother's handwriting. My breath caught as I opened it. The letter inside was brief but haunting. "You were always meant to be part of their world. Protect yourself, my darling. Trust no one." Part of their world? My mind raced. What had my mother known about the Graysons? And why had they taken me in? The puzzle pieces were falling into place, but the picture they painted was darker than I could have imagined. With Victor's help, I began compiling evidence against Lila and Elias. Every discovery brought us closer to the truth, but it also brought new dangers. One night, Victor found me staring at a threatening message on my phone. "We know what you're doing. Stop, or you'll regret it." He placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "They're scared. That means we're getting close." I nodded, swallowing my fear. I couldn't back down now. I should have known Lila wouldn't go down without a fight. When the police showed up at Victor's apartment with a warrant, my heart sank. She'd framed me for corporate espionage, planting fabricated evidence that tied me to a rival company. Victor acted fast, guiding me out the back door as the officers searched the apartment. We fled into the night, my sanctuary turned into a prison once more. As we drove toward a safe house, I clenched my fists. She's not going to win, I vowed. I'll expose her if it's the last thing I do. Victor glanced at me, his jaw set. We will. The safe house was a small cabin tucked away in the woods, far from prying eyes. Victor's old friend had offered it as a refuge, but even here, I couldn't escape the shadows of my past. We'll get through this, Victor said, his hand brushing mine as we sat by the fire one evening. His steady presence was the only thing keeping me grounded. For the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to believe him. Our first victory came when we leaked evidence of Lila's offshore accounts to the media. The public backlash was swift, forcing Elias to publicly distance himself from her. It wasn't enough to take them down completely, but it was a start. As I watched the news coverage that night, a spark of hope lit within me. The Graysons' empire was beginning to crumble, and I would make sure it fell completely. Victor's apartment had become more than just a refuge, it was a sanctuary where I could finally feel safe, at least for fleeting moments. But as I watched him, quiet and thoughtful over a simple dinner, I couldn't shake the sense that he was carrying a weight far heavier than my own. You've been quiet, I said softly, breaking the silence. He glanced up, hesitating. Just thinking. About. Victor's fork clinked against his plate as he set it down. For a moment, he seemed to wrestle with himself, and then he sighed. My sister. I blinked, caught off guard. Victor never talked about his family. She was younger than you when it happened, he continued, his voice low and steady. There was an accident. I wasn't there to protect her. I should have been, but I wasn't. His words hung heavy in the air. I didn't press for details, sensing the pain beneath them. Instead, I reached across the table and placed my hand over his. You protect people now, I said. That's what matters. Victor's eyes met mine, and for a moment, the walls he'd built around himself seemed to crack. You remind me of her, he said quietly. Strong. Resilient. But you don't have to do this alone, Amara. Not anymore. The vulnerability in his voice shook me. I nodded, squeezing his hand. Neither do you. Ethan was not what I expected. When Victor introduced me to him, I saw a wiry young man with a mischievous grin and a laptop that seemed permanently attached to his hands. This is the hacker? I asked, skeptical. Ethan smirked. You were expecting someone taller? Despite my doubts, it quickly became clear that Ethan knew his stuff. Within minutes, he had pulled up files from the Grayson Company's servers that made my stomach churn. Lila's offshore accounts. Payments to shell companies. Names of accomplices. This is enough to cause a scandal, Ethan said, leaning back in his chair. But if we're going to take them down completely, we'll need more. I stared at the screen, my hands clenched into fists. Then we'll get more. Ethan grinned. I like her, Victor. She's feisty. Victor rolled his eyes but didn't argue. Lila was running. We discovered her plan to flee the country through one of Ethan's hacks, and it sent a wave of urgency through our little team. She's booked a private jet, Ethan announced one night, his fingers flying across his keyboard. Leaves in 3 days. 3 days. My chest tightened. If she escaped, we'd lose our chance to expose her and bring the Graysons to justice. We'll stop her, Victor said, his voice steady. But as the hours ticked by, the threats started rolling in. Messages on my phone. A package left at Victor's door containing a burned photograph of me. Each one was a reminder that we were playing a dangerous game. They're scared, Victor said, placing a reassuring hand on my shoulder. That means we're getting close. I nodded, swallowing my fear. I wouldn't let them win. Elias's office was as cold and sterile as I remembered. He sat behind his massive desk, his expression unreadable as I confronted him. Tell me the truth about the ransom, I demanded. Elias's jaw tightened. Amara, it's complicated. No. It's simple. Did you refuse to pay? He looked away, and my heart sank. It wasn't my decision, he said finally. Father ordered me not to pay. He said it would set a dangerous precedent. Dangerous precedent? My blood boiled. I was a person, Elias. Your sister. Not some pawn in a game of corporate chess. Elias's silence was all the confirmation I needed. I turned on my heel and walked out, my heart heavy with anger and betrayal. Back at Victor's apartment, I couldn't stop thinking about the letter I'd found. The cryptic words from my biological mother haunted me. You were always meant to be part of their world. What had she meant? And why had the Graysons taken me in? As I sat there, staring at the letter, a thought occurred to me. Victor, I said, looking up. What if there's more to my adoption than we know? He frowned. You think there's a connection? I don't know, I admitted. But I'm going to find out. Victor and I sat in silence, the glow of Ethan's laptop illuminating his intense expression as he scrolled through the files. Every click seemed to uncover another layer of Lila's betrayal: offshore accounts, payments to shell companies, and encrypted communications with people whose names sent chills down my spine. "She's been coordinating with the kidnappers all along," Ethan said, his voice grim. "We need proof," I said. "Something irrefutable. She'll just deny it otherwise." Ethan grinned. "Already on it." He tapped a few keys, pulling up a recording from Lila's office, an audio file extracted from her phone. Her voice came through, cold and calculating. "If we're going to keep her quiet, make it hurt. The longer she's in pain, the more leverage we have. And don't forget to send a message to Elias. Remind him who's really in control." My stomach churned. Victor's jaw tightened, and his hands curled into fists. "We have her," he said. "This ends now." The media frenzy erupted the moment the audio leaked. Lila's voice played on every major news channel, her words damning her as the architect of my suffering. For the first time in months, I felt like I had the upper hand. But Elias wasn't going to let this scandal take him down without a fight. He called a press conference, standing before the cameras with his polished, calculated demeanor. "The Grayson family condemns these actions," he said, his voice steady. "Lila acted without our knowledge or consent. She has been terminated effective immediately, and we will cooperate fully with authorities." I watched from Victor's apartment, fury burning in my chest. "He's throwing her under the bus," I said. Victor nodded. "He's protecting himself." But I wasn't done yet. Elias might have distanced himself from Lila, but I knew he was just as culpable. It was time to confront him directly. When we arrived at the Grayson headquarters, the tension in the air was palpable. Security was tighter than usual, but Victor had a way of navigating situations like this. We made it to Elias's office without incident. Elias looked up as we entered, his expression shifting from surprise to irritation. "Amara," he said, leaning back in his chair. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" I slammed a folder onto his desk. "You know exactly why I'm here. Lila might be the face of this operation, but you're the one pulling the strings." He glanced at the folder but didn't touch it. "You have no idea what you're talking about." Before I could respond, the door burst open, and armed guards stormed in. My heart sank as they trained their weapons on Victor. "Step away from him," one of them barked. Victor stepped in front of me, his body shielding mine. "Let her go," he said, his voice calm but firm. "Victor, no," I began, but he cut me off. "Stay behind me," he whispered. The situation escalated quickly, and before I knew it, Victor was being dragged out in handcuffs. I screamed, struggling against the guards holding me back. Elias stood, his expression cold. "This could have gone differently, Amara. Remember that." I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Victor being hauled away, his face calm despite the chaos around him. He'd sacrificed himself to protect me, and now I had to make sure it wasn't in vain. With Ethan's help, I gathered every piece of evidence we'd collected and prepared for the board meeting. This wasn't just about exposing Elias anymore. It was about reclaiming my life and ensuring Victor's safety. The boardroom was tense when I walked in. Elias sat at the head of the table, flanked by his father and other executives. I took a deep breath and began laying out the evidence: the financial records, the audio recordings, the communications with Lila. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the room. Elias's father looked furious, while Elias himself maintained his composure, though I could see the cracks forming. "You've been lying to everyone," I said, my voice steady. "To the board, to the media, to your own family. But it ends today." The fallout was immediate. Elias and his father were removed from their positions, the Grayson empire left in shambles. I didn't feel triumphant, though. All I wanted was to see Victor again. When I finally did, he was sitting in a small holding cell, his face lighting up when he saw me. "Took you long enough," he said, his smile teasing but warm. I laughed, tears streaming down my face. "You're coming home." Victor and I left the city behind, settling in a quiet town far from the chaos. The scars of the past lingered, but for the first time in years, I felt hope. We built a life together, piece by piece. And though the memories of what we'd been through would never fully fade, they no longer defined us. We were free. The sun set over the quiet town as I stood on the porch of our little house, watching Victor in the garden. He caught my gaze and smiled, his hands brushing the dirt off his jeans. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, walking over to me. I took his hand and squeezed it. "How far we've come." Victor pulled me into his arms, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt truly safe. Together, we had faced the darkness and emerged stronger. This was our new beginning, and I was determined to cherish every moment of it. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe to my YouTube channel.